Good afternoon and welcome to the At Home with ERM and KJA webinar series. My name is Ollie Moore and I'm a partner at ERM. The current global climate under COVID-19 restrictions is changing every day. To support you and your organisation to continue to move forward, maintain delivery and innovate during these times, we've curated a set of topics in this webinar series that we hope will spark thought, insight and learning. This webinar, Stakeholders Matter and They Impact Decisions, take a new look at stakeholder engagement, is presented by Vanessa Merriweather and Nat Earle. Vanessa has over 20 years experience in its stakeholder engagement in large global organisations and a strong track record of ensuring that business objectives are not only met, but key relationships result in stakeholders becoming advocates. A multi-skilled corporate affairs professional, Vanessa knows the importance of quickly understanding stakeholder objectives to build trust, communicate value, and achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. With industry experience in health, pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, technology, water, government, and not-for-profit, Vanessa aligns strategy with business vision and provokes the right conversations to influence business decisions. With a background in neuroscience and behavioural psychology, Vanessa provides a unique approach to stakeholder engagement. Nat Earle has a background in business strategy and analysis for private industry and government. Nat has a bachelor's degree in economics from Macquarie University and is currently studying data science. He's a skilled communicator with experience in high-pressure sales environments where robust data analysis can drive great decisions. At KJA, Nat works with local governments to efficiently plan and execute community engagement, supported by good analytical thinking. Before we hand over to our presenters, our facilitator for today, Paula Lawrence, will take us through how to use GoToWebinar platform. Over to you, Paula.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So for those of you who haven't used the webinar platform before, you'll see you have a control panel. Now, all of you will have come into this meeting muted, and your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the presentation. We can unmute you at the back end when we get into the question and answer session. You will see that there's a hands up function, and we encourage you to use the hands up function if you want to ask a question. There is also a question function, so you can type your question into the question box and someone will respond to you, or we may use that question at the back end when we're doing the Q&A. Next slide. Now, when you received your invitation in your calendar entry, you also will have received a quick survey. For those of you who haven't completed the survey, there's an opportunity to complete that now, and Nat Earle will be monitoring responses as part of his presentation a bit later in the webinar. The survey link is there now if you have a couple of moments to fill that in. We hope you have a great webinar, and I'll hand over to Vanessa.
Thanks, Paula, and thank you, Ollie, for the introduction, and welcome to today's webinar. So how do you normally do stakeholder engagement? I imagine you start with clear objectives, map your stakeholders, engage with those stakeholders to inform your strategy, and deliver a successful strategy. And then, of course, you review your performance. It's a straightforward recipe, and I can imagine there's a lot of head nodding right now. As specialists in engagement, this approach brings good rigor and is a good standard. But what role does data play in all of this? Today, we'll talk about how engaging stakeholders is just part of the story. Yes, it is all about your stakeholders, but it's also about how you engage with them to gain data and draw insights to make better decisions. When we work with our clients on stakeholder engagement, we start with the outcome in mind. What are the outcomes we need to achieve from this interaction, this project, or this strategy? Whether it's managing change, providing strategic advice, facilitating discussions, or delivering a co-design, it's important to navigate stakeholder needs and mitigate risks before they eventuate. So, a proven approach is to mitigate risks and identify, anticipate, and address issues from the beginning. The way you manage risk can depend on your background, your experience, your risk appetite, and your organization's risk culture. We also use data to map relationships, the good and the bad. We create a narrative and develop a clear plan. And Nat will share more about this with his cool data dashboard later. And for stakeholders, it's essential to create and deliver a tailored engagement experience where stakeholders feel valued, where they've had the opportunity to contribute, be heard, and connect with others. So a proven approach is all about mitigating risk, using data, and creating tailored solutions to engage with your stakeholders. But who are your stakeholders and what makes them tick? As you know, stakeholders are individuals or groups who affect or could be affected by your organization's activities, products, or services. Your stakeholders may be internal, so your employees, business units, leadership teams, or your board, or they may be external, your suppliers, investors, customers, local communities, NGOs, government agencies, or trade associations. But don't forget, your stakeholders are only human. Relationships are key, and they're far more important than you think. And they're never simple or straightforward. So let's talk about risk. Engaging with your stakeholders helps you manage risk. To survive in a challenging business environment, I think we're there now, and remain relevant, you need to engage with your stakeholder groups. A robust engagement model is vital in helping you better understand and respond to your stakeholders' needs. This isn't just about sustaining goodwill or earning a social license. It's also about remaining competitive. Being proactive is key to maintaining your reputation. Stakeholders can react differently, even to a single word. For example, the word bug. And you can see there's 3 very different reactions from 3 different stakeholder groups there. So robust stakeholder and public engagement strategies will allow you to successfully manage reputational risk. Creating and delivering a tailored experience where stakeholders are engaged is key. And now I'm going to hand you over to Nat.
Thanks, Vanessa. At the core of any engagement process is a desire to better understand the thoughts and sentiments of stakeholders. Data visualization tools allow for greater clarity and assessment of stakeholder feedback, providing projects with quality data readily available for decision making. On the screen, you can see an example of our demographics targeting dashboard, which gives a high-level understanding of how successful and representative an engagement process around a small construction project has been in reaching culturally and linguistically diverse communities, different age groups, and stakeholders by suburb. The first step in delivering a data-informed engagement process is to consider the current environment. Look at existing data sets that can be linked to your project. These can help validate new information you will collect later. Existing CRM databases and previous consultations are a great first place to start. Big, freely available information is also very useful. Census data, like we've used in this dashboard, can provide great insights. The next step is planning an engagement process. The next step in planning an engagement process is to gather any new information that you might have determined will help the delivery or strategy of the project. Ways of obtaining data can be through digital engagement, such as surveys, interactive maps, forums, or webinars like this one. Later in the presentation, we'll show you our digital open house, which can help you run better engagement online. An important consideration in any engagement process is representative engagement. We know that different groups of people can have varied reactions to our projects. We also know that some groups are louder than others. Having a better understanding of who's engaged with a project can help us understand what the feedback we've received means. This helps us retarget our communication to hear more quiet stakeholders. These quiet stakeholders, as we know, often give very different perspectives. This dashboard allowed KJA and the client to retarget our communications to capture audiences that may be underrepresented in the engagement sample. This in turn helps the project managers build a defensible and robust proposal that is informed by the true feelings of the community, not just the loud ones that we're used to hearing. Mining existing information and creating new data sets which can be aligned to existing information is proving to be valuable for a range of our clients and projects. The visualization helps non-technical members of the project team understand and act on insights generated during and after the engagement process. What we've found is that there is a lot of data that's gathered in consultation program, whether you might be specifically gathering it or not. We've been working with a number of clients to improve the value of this information. If you don't mind the next slide, Vanessa, and I'll try and grab control now. So, sorry guys. So you should be able to see our dashboard. So this is if hopefully some of you have completed the survey. Well, I know that some of you have completed the survey that we sent out yesterday and shared earlier in this presentation. What this dashboard provides is an easy and accessible format to view stakeholder information and sentiment. Most importantly, we're able to cross-filter stakeholder responses to view subsets of the information you provided to us through the survey. So on the page here, you can see down the bottom, there's 3 charts that show the yes and no responses to the 3 simple questions that we asked. On the left-hand side, we have a tree map that gives a slightly more detailed understanding and shows your responses to the question, what tools you use to understand the stakeholders. In the center of the screen is a free text response that shows what you felt you needed to understand your stakeholders. And then on the right of the screen, we've got a map that shows where you've filled in your responses from. Now, we didn't actually ask that question in the survey, and I'll explain to you how we got that information in a moment. What this sort of dashboard provides is sort of 2 things. One is the ability to cross-filter and cross-reference the information that we receive from stakeholders. So you can see in this question, do you use data to make better decisions? Already a lot of you are doing a good job. There's 60% of you answered yes to the question. Just over 40% answered no. If we click here, we're able to immediately see the subset of stakeholders that answered, do you use data to make a better decision, that said no, what they do. And so you can see over here, that group of people do not use customer relationship management software in their business, nor do they use census data in their business, which is different to the broader cohort. So in my opinion, those are 2 critical tools to bring data to the center of your business decision making. So this dashboard gives you an easy way to distill and understand the views of different stakeholders. Another thing we often hear from our clients, especially running digital engagement like so many of us have been doing over the last couple of months, is how to weigh up the different opinions of different stakeholders. Especially online surveys, it's very difficult to understand which stakeholders' feedback is more meaningful than others. For example, if you were constructing a major road project, you'd be more interested in the opinions of stakeholders who live close to the road and would be impacted by construction and the operation of the road versus someone several kilometers away whose opinion might not be so important, I guess, to your delivery process. So with this map over here, I can just blow it up. With this map, we've used the IP address that was captured by the surveying software. So this IP address, it's like a little breadcrumb trail that you leave all over the internet. and it helps us understand what location the people who've completed the survey have answered from. Now, it's always better to ask the question to the stakeholders directly, but sometimes we're not able to do that. So this is a way to validate that data in a different way. So you can see on the map here, people have answered these questions from all over Australia, and including one person even in Singapore, but I'll get to that in a moment. And maybe we're only interested in hearing the responses of people in Sydney, because the project that we're working on is from Sydney. And so we can just quickly right-click and exclude these stakeholders' information for the purposes of reporting at this stage from our total survey sample, and really quickly helps you weight the different responses of the survey. Now, as I alluded to before, privacy and the validity of information is always a critical thing to consider. IP addresses are not the perfect way of understanding where people have answered the question from, and this response over here in Singapore is likely a VPN that someone's been using. So it sort of illustrates that, you know, it's always better to understand your stakeholders and ask them directly what you want to know, but there's other ways of working through that process. So I'll just, that's that dashboard. You can grab the control back, Vanessa, if you want. And maybe go to the next slide. So I guess it must be said, no anonymized digital engagement can replace the work you do in the field building relationships with stakeholders. This should always be the foundation of any engagement process. But these tools can provide a new lens with which to view the sentiment of the broader community and underlying trends that may not come out otherwise. So you think it's a good idea, but where do you start? Many organizations are now collecting data about their stakeholders through their normal operations. Some organizations may not even consider this as data, but simply information that they use for normal business operations. We worked with a linear infrastructure provider recently to utilize the existing data lake in their customer relationship management tool, in this case, Consultation Manager, to generate a more holistic view of their stakeholder sentiments. The information extracted from an existing database can be mined to uncover trends or provide visualizations for more thoughtful reporting. In this example, single stakeholder engagement data is extracted and pushed into a visualization model, providing the ability to see strategic relationships between stakeholders, their exact locations, their sentiment, and engagement activities we complete to meet with them. The visualization tool can be filtered, allowing the engagement manager to hone in on specific elements or areas of interest within the project. The visualization tool can also be configured for different views, such as quick specific reporting for an in-the-field engagement manager, or a very high-level view for senior executive reporting. Importantly, when using existing stakeholder data, and as I mentioned before, privacy needs to be considered. While this isn't normally won't normally impact the ability to use information already owned by an organization, new regulations in overseas markets require stakeholder data to be given with consent, de-identified, and for the rights of the data subject to be held above the interests of the data controller. It's not normally an issue, but it is something always to consider when you're looking at opportunities to utilize your data. For this client, the dashboard is an additional tool to help KJ's engagement program and project team that is working on this project to understand the needs of stakeholders and make better decisions. The fast reporting helps KJ's in-the-field engagement managers understand trends developing among conversations related to property acquisition. The dashboard also helps senior executives and project managers see the results of engagement activities like drop-in sessions in real time. The dashboard has brought greater accuracy, speed, and legibility for this organization's reporting. Next slide, please, Vanessa. Finally, the second case study. A common way of learning about our stakeholders is through surveying. Our product allows data obtained via an online survey to be automatically uploaded into a visualization tool, as I showed you earlier, providing access to real-time information after the survey goes live. This allows the project team to be more responsive in their engagement process. The visualization provides a consolidated view of all survey responses and allows filtering and cross-representation of data to allow the end user to view information both by respondent and across groups of respondents, similar to what I showed you on the dashboard before. The survey response data can be cross-checked against other existing data sets. For this local government, for this developer client, KJ used a similar methodology as on the previous slide to match survey information against ABS demographic data in that local government area. The analysis demonstrates if the survey responses provide a representative sample of opinions that would appropriately inform decision-making for the project's outcomes. Further, it can identify apparent deficiencies in the survey sample, which is always a challenge with engagement, and use targeted communication in an effort to address those deficiencies. For this client, we were able to identify if survey responses were low among particular non-English speaking groups, and then we used targeted social media advertising to reach that group that was underrepresented in the sample. This helps balance the sample for better accuracy and often helps us achieve a better project outcome. Most importantly for this client that was exhibiting a reasonably controversial planning change, the engagement methodology created a very defensible engagement strategy which met all the requirements of council to progress the projects through the planning stage. As we alluded to on the previous slide, while there are often challenging conversations with loud stakeholders on these kinds of local planning projects, casting the net a little wider using a targeted data-driven approach can help us understand the true sentiment of the broader community, include their feedback, and ultimately seek their approval. Next slide, Vanessa, and that's all from me.
Thanks, Nat, and thanks everyone for responding to the survey. I found that really interesting to see how Nat's data dashboard actually brought those survey results to life. And just looking at the map and seeing where you all are was really interesting too, so thank you. We also wanted to share with you today the virtual open house. This is a socially distant way that you can engage your stakeholders. It's an interactive website that acts just like a virtual drop-in session. It's similar to in-person events. Users can walk through an open house meeting room by clicking different display panels or stations. Each panel is focused on a topic and includes a variety of interactive features to engage the user and encourage questions and comments along the way. In fact, everything can be customized in the virtual open house. And of course, this digital engagement tool can be used to complement any face-to-face interactions that you may have. There are a few key elements that you can use to engage. So if you just follow the letters around the screen, I'll take you through it. So if you look at A, that's an interactive project map. B would be videos on the location or facility tours. C is where the public can comment or respond to a questionnaire tied to a location. D is an interactive station with various media formats to guide users through a story. E can have some animated charts and graphs. F would be potentially videos with a subject matter expert explaining a topic. And G, you could include downloadable content or links to other content, so fact sheets or frequently asked questions. So this is just one example of digital stakeholder engagement. Of course, there's many, many others, but this interactive web platform can reflect your brand, your content, and collect valuable data. And data will inform and refine how this interactive digital tool is developed. Data is our friend. This is a great way to engage your stakeholders without having to socially distance. So, how can you be more prepared for your stakeholders in the future? There are obviously plenty of things to consider whether you're in a COVID or a post-COVID world. But our top three are mitigate risks and identify, anticipate, and address issues from the beginning. The value of effective engagement is being future fit. So understanding the real risks and the perceived risks your project or your organisation faces is important. Use data to map relationships, create a narrative, and develop a clear plan. We encourage you to mine every piece of data that you can to really get under the bonnet of how your stakeholders are acting, thinking, and feeling. This will also help you plan strategically rather than react and jump to tools and tactics. Whether it's tomorrow, next year, or in 5 years' time, trust your data and be ready to flex and change in response to what your stakeholders are saying. And if you can't, then you need to be ready to give good reasons why not. And finally, create and deliver a tailored engagement experience where stakeholders feel valued. When you stay on top of your stakeholder issues and use the data available to you, you'll be able to make better decisions. You'll then have their trust and attention. And as we all know, these are valuable commodities to help ride out any storm. So thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the presentation today. So I'm now going to hand over to Paula.
Thanks, Vanessa. And look, that was a fantastic presentation. So everyone, this is your opportunity to let us know if you've got questions or perhaps to make any comments. As I said at the beginning of the session, you can raise your hand and we will take you off mute to ask any questions, or you're encouraged to pop them into the question box. Certainly for me, I think, the data tool that Nat took us through is fantastic. It's great to be able to manipulate data that can help inform decision makers. It's fantastic to be able to see that you could really present data in a variety of ways. Do we have anyone with any questions? Well, while we're waiting for a question, Vanessa and Nat, I'd love to know what's the length of time to develop and deploy something like this? And I've got David, I'll come to you in 1 second.
It's important to be able to understand, I guess, the challenge that we're trying to address. Like the local planning example I put forward, that's quite a straightforward process. It's the integration of a survey with a one-page dashboard and then a communication strategy, and that can be a matter of days. A much more large-scale integration of existing data sets we approach it each client with we need to sort of understand their needs and what is possible and what will provide value in that case, and that's, I guess, an individual scoping exercise for each project. Sometimes it can be very easy if the database is well organized, but there's a bit of a saying in data science that garbage in is garbage out. You can't do much if it's not well organized. So, a lot of time can be spent in that preparation stage, and then the rollout can be quite fast after that.
Fantastic, thank you for that. David Snasher, you had a question.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Vanessa, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the virtual town hall in a little bit more detail about how long it takes and how difficult it is to build it, and how you release it to people. How easy is it for them to enter it, with their technology? Is it just clicking on a website link and things like that? So can you just talk a little bit more about that, the virtual town hall?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Good question. So the length of time to put something like that together is dependent on whether the client has the content to start with. So if the client has the content, then it's about manipulating that content and presenting it in a visual way that it presents as an open house. If there is no content available, then it's about developing the content and then setting up the virtual house. So you can imagine it depends on what data and content is available. And then in terms of access, you're right, it's as simple as accessing a website. and every virtual house is absolutely tailored to the client. So it would have a different look and feel depending on who the client is and what they actually want to achieve out of that open house. And it's a pretty exciting way to engage people and to collect data as well as provide a clear brand to your stakeholders. So thanks, David.
Vanessa, I've got a follow-up, if I may, and I'm cutting
Yeah.
across over other people. And so you just said collect data. So it's got an interactive element. So as people go into the virtual town hall, they leave comment. How do they leave comment?
So we can create tools that link to things that they click through. So for instance, if you recall, I think it was B or C, there was a connection to the project map. And so you could have a survey that's linked to that map or to a particular facet of the project. And the client would go in, the stakeholder would go in and fill out that survey, and then you would collect that data. There may be other areas in the room where they can leave comments or suggestions or feedback on aspects of the project.
So Vanessa and Nat, David's gone back onto mute. So Vanessa and Nat, we've got another couple of questions. The first one is, can you please rehash how you are using the data in stakeholder databases, for example, Consultation Manager, to show results of your stakeholder engagement? And that question's from Laurie.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. So I'll touch on the example that I gave in the presentation, which was a linear infrastructure provider. They obviously have quite a lot of interactions with key stakeholders around land acquisition to deliver that infrastructure, and also, of course, lots of neighbouring properties and other key stakeholders in the area. One of the, I suppose, deficiencies in Consultation Manager is that you can't view information in aggregate. So you can't view lots of stakeholder feedback together to understand themes. So that client had years of Consultation Manager data, all their different conversations. The project managers had diligently tagged and themed those conversations over the years. And then we were able to take that data, align it on a map. So align the different stakeholders on a map that correlated with the alignment of their project, and then also sort of show the themes of those conversations. And then we were able to show the client what the key areas of concern were in different areas of the project. And they were able to modify, or actually we were, since we were delivering the engagement as well, we were able to modify our communications approach in different areas to address the different needs along their alignment. So I guess I alluded to it before, it's very specific client to client, and depending on the data that you already have in your database. I think one of the, especially with Consultation Manager, the best opportunities come from grouping lots of stakeholder feedback together and then trying to pull themes out of that to understand what a whole town or what a whole electorate is thinking about your project.
Fantastic. And the next question is from Jessica. She's asked, are there any tips on how you can bring people back into a project which has been delayed a few times and has been ongoing for a long time?
Maybe
That's a
Vanessa?
really good question. Yeah, Jessica, thank you for that question. And how many times have we all experienced that? Yeah, everyone's going, yeah. So that comes back to stakeholder motivations. So what's going to benefit them? How can you tap into, first of all, understanding what is motivating them and what will benefit them, and why should they care, and why should they be involved. So if there is a key motivating factor for them to get involved and get engaged, then tap into that. And then, so it's really understanding what that is, and then understanding the channels and the tools to actually access those stakeholders, because access is really important as well. You know, at the moment, access is an issue in terms of physical access, and so we're all living in a digital world, but there's also communities that can't be accessed via digital tools, so considering those issues as well. But it's always down to motivation and what's the benefit to them, and how can you show that for them to engage with.
Fantastic. And I've got another question here. Nat, it's probably one for you. Can the survey be delivered via digital means, for example, iPhone, and does that manipulate the data in some way? It's a great question. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, of course, it can be delivered digitally, and the ability to I guess gain better insights, such as like the IP address example that I gave, is much easier if it's delivered digitally. In terms of mobile delivery, it can be. The survey that I had put out as part of this presentation was mobile friendly, and we can view whether people have answered on a desktop or on a mobile, and maybe that would give you some insights into how to better engage with your stakeholders at a later stage. For example, if everyone is engaging with your survey through mobile, potentially your communication strategy should leverage a lot of social media advertising rather than in-print advertising, because you can probably guess that someone filling out your survey on a mobile is much more likely to be looking at Facebook than reading the local newspaper.
Fantastic, Nat. Thanks for that. Do we have any final questions? We've had quite a good bit of conversation here this afternoon, so thank you all for that. If there are no further questions, Ollie, I'll just throw back to you just to mention the upcoming webinar. Someone can jump to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everyone for that. Thanks Vanessa and Nat, and thanks everyone who's attended today and contributed to the lively discussion. That's really, really fascinating stuff. Just wanted to raise that that was the 4th of our webinar series. We've got another one lined up for next week, which is titled Environmental Social Governance in the Time of COVID and Beyond. That will be next Thursday at 1 p.m. So I hope as many of you as possible can attend, and don't hesitate to flick the invites on to any of your potentially interested colleagues. Thanks very much and have a good day.
Okay, so thanks everyone. That brings us to the end of our webinar today. We thank you all for coming along. It's been fantastic to have so many people join us for what was a great presentation from Vanessa and Nat. So we wish you a good afternoon. Thanks everyone.